Hello and warm welcome everyone to Unlocking Team Growth in 2024 powered by Superflow. We are super happy that this fireside chat is hosted by Donald H. Taylor, the chair of the Learning Technologies Conference. Our goal today is to uncover real stories and the path to success from high-performing companies such as Google, Adobe, and BetterUp. We actually committed a small mistake, and that's why I'm recording the first part for you. And that is, we were already in the middle of the first question when we started the recording. So that's why let me introduce the agenda and our first panel. In the first section of the fireside chat, we will talk about how to master growth. What is the secret of the high-performing companies? What we can know about the practices of Google, Adobe, and BetterUp to power OKRs for team and company success. In the second part, it will be our organizational designers' best practices on how to run successful OKR workshops and what you can do to maximize team learning, productivity, and well-being. And make sure that you stay till the very end, because in part 3, we'll have a special announcement for you. So with that, I would like to welcome Max Cromarty, Google's capability solution consultant, to the stage, together with Renae Fisher, who is an OKR queen. She's the OKRs at Adobe practice lead. And also Tatyana Gruver, who is a specialist in product management and growth with an experience at BetterUp. Thank you, everyone. And with that, Don, the stage is yours.
We just started recording, so you're going to have to go back and repeat everything you've just said. No, you haven't. Well, to summarize what you've just said, Max, and it's really interesting. Yes, we know that OKRs, objectives and key results, have been identified as being crucial to success at Google, but that's not all. Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety, and she's not the only person talking about it, but she's the lead person, has really shown how important that's been to Google's success. It's been identified, hasn't it, as one of the key factors of success in Google Teams.
Absolutely.
And then behind that, you've got you're mentioning the whole business of the need for communication, getting things set up on the right foot, and the fact that communication is not about talking at people, but it's a two-way street, it's a relationship. And I think that's so often something we forget when we're talking about communication. Very quickly, any thoughts about how you can persuade people who've got that broadcast view of the world to take a step back and be quiet and listen?
Absolutely. Just remember that whoever you're talking to is probably hearing it for the first time, and they are not going to be able to connect with it the same way that you are, because you just have two different levels of understanding about this topic. And so if you just ask them some questions and ultimately try and get yourself into their shoes and to see their view, you're in a much better position to share a message that they can connect with. And so really what I'm talking about is empathy and understanding your audience, but it's quite a deliberate act to move in that direction.
I'm going to hold back, so I want to get through to the rest of the panelists, but that precipitates a whole bunch of questions I've got around whether everyone can naturally or show empathy, or if everyone's ready, even if they don't do it naturally, to learn how to do it almost as a routine. But I'm not going to quiz you on that, Max. I'm going to move on to the rest of the panel about it. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Tatyana now, Tatyana Gruver. You've launched, let's get Tatyana. Oh, she's in the fire. Goodness me, let's get her out the fire quickly. I do like the immersive space, and it requires
warm in a fire. Yeah, cozy.
Some sort of manipulation, but there we are. Good to have you back, and you don't need it. Actually, San Francisco can be pretty cold sometimes. What's it like at the moment?
It's foggy, about 60, 62.
There we go. So foggy in San Fran is not necessarily a surprise, is it? But you've led multiple successful products, such as BetterUp, and you've increased conversion rates and improved net promoter scores. all of which is a sort of performance piece that we're looking for. We're not doing this just for the sake of itself. What role did the team alignment on the objectives and the key results play in doing this, and how did you get there?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And to echo something that Max said, I think clarity is a big part of it, but how you get to clarity, I think it's easier said than done.
Right.
So all of these projects were highly cross-functional. We see these big numbers, these big achievements, but obviously it's not one single person that's doing it all. That means there are entire teams and entire departments contributing to the same goal. And I work in product management, but to achieve these results, I needed the entire team in the company. And I'm talking marketing, customer service, finance, you name it, we've probably worked together. And as you can imagine, and I'm sure some of you have had first experience with it here, working with a large team, multiple departments can sometimes get out of hand. You work with high performance, people want to do their best, but it ends up being chaotic. It's kind of like a Tower of Babel. Good intentions don't always lead to great execution.
Yeah.
So how do you take all that energy, all those good intentions, and channel it into something worthwhile? We need a North Star. We need some kind of metric to get us all aligned. And this is where I've seen OKRs come in really strong to bring that single focus and alignment to a cross-functional working group. And we've touched on this, but just to repeat, OKRs is objectives and key results. And I like to see OKRs being most successful when the company has it at every level. So that means we have our top company objectives, then functional, then by team. And then I, as a product manager, the lead, I can use this information to get on the same page with my partners. So I can see what we're doing as a company, see what my team is doing, and then go to my cross-functional partners and align on what we're doing together. So for example, if our objectives is to win the hearts and minds of our customers, one way of measuring this could be NPS. And we can definitely do a lot on product to increase NPS. And NPS, by the way, stands for Net Promoter Score. It points to the likelihood of your customers promoting your product to their network. And if you have a high NPS score, it means you're doing really well. But many things can raise NPS, lower NPS. And for example, when I was working on that review post, I had to work with customer service, with our engineering team, with our billing department to see the entire experience end to end. And without aligning on what we're measuring and what we're going towards for, you can imagine that all those different teams would have been working their hardest, but working in a different direction. And when we put it all together, you're going to go back at the end of the quarter, look at your results and be like, okay, NPS changed, but who did what worked, and how did we contribute to it? So I've been using OKRs to really get the clear alignment on what we're doing and how we're working together as a group.
That business of alignment, as you say, really works when it's throughout the organization. Everyone's using the same tool. Have you been in organizations where OKRs haven't been equally understood or implemented throughout the organization? And if so, what do you do about it?
I have, and I don't think if your organization has different ways of measuring your goals, you're not going to get as much out of the OKR framework. Because, for example, you can have OKRs on a product team and you have your clear objectives and key results, but then on a higher level, you have just some high-level goals, and you don't really understand how your work is contributing to the top line.
Okay, so the obvious next question is, how do you fix that?
Yeah, I think you make the argument that if you are going to use OKR framework, it's best that it starts from the top down. Yeah. Then you can actually model the right behaviors, model the right habits, and tracking measurements of data. And then it makes everybody's life so much easier. You don't have to second guess if your work is contributing to your company top level goals.
And of course, at Google, you know, we read the quotes where Larry Page is saying, yeah, we reckon OKRs it led to 10 times or something like that, you know, a huge leap in productivity. If it's the person at the top saying it, you know the organization is going to be behind it. That's very cool. I just want to reflect on Max's point earlier about empathy. Do you have any thoughts about how I loved his point about the idea that when you're explaining something to somebody, they may be hearing it for the first time, even when you're not.
Yeah.
And you have to have this place where people can be free to listen and take their time to do it. And empathy is crucial. But we also know that actually some leaders aren't very empathic. Do you have any thoughts about that? I'm not suggesting you have any particular experience of this, but do you have any feeling of how we can make sure that OKRs can be planted in, if you like, in fertile soil, that they can be in the best environment to succeed?
Yeah. So empathy, I think a big component of that is understanding where the other person is coming from, like understanding their reality. And what better tool to foster that than objectives and key results? Because if your entire company is using OKRs, you know that your partner has some kind of objectives and key results they need to hit to be successful. And they're probably not quite the same as what your team is doing, probably similar, but understanding their world and where they're coming from. Like maybe my goal is to increase NPS, but their goal is to increase a number of users in our platform. So by that very nature, we're going to have competing priorities where they need to expand the numbers and I need to increase the quality. But it's important to come to the table with understanding what's top of their mind, what's worrying them, and then figure out how to work together to actually be more productive.
I really like that point, that the OKRs, even for those who are not empathic leaders, act as, if you like, almost a process by which they can have
Exactly,
a
because
conversation.
it brings up the conversation.
Exactly. That's really good point. Thank you so much. Let's pull Renae over. I don't know if she's going to land in the chair or in the fire, or maybe she'll be outside looking through the window. Let's find out. Tatyana, thank you so much. Here, oh, she's looking through the window. There she is. Hi. Right, come in, please. Sit by. I don't know if that's happening deliberately, but anyway, good to see you full size sitting at the table. Renae, picking up on these points then that Max and Tatyana have brought, this idea that OKRs act as this framework. Anyone can use it as a structure for having a conversation with somebody, but you're passionate about enabling effective communication and alignment of strategy with OKRs, and you've got a wealth of experience running strategic and operational initiatives at Adobe. What are some of the key lessons you've learned about designing a successful growth strategy, and how have the OKRs helped you achieve that goal? So let's go from the tactical to the strategic, and how do we link them together?
Sure. So when we build the successful growth strategy for a complex enterprise, it really necessitates a lot of focus by necessity. We need to know what are those key drivers, and we need to be working in unison to drive those outcomes. So using OKRs really helps us manage our strategy in a way that creates that focus and drives the right conversations to uncover those misaligned priorities or gaps in execution. One thing that we're really focusing on going into FY24, and we're in that unique space, by the way, that we do not have a top-down mandate and implementation of OKRs. This has actually been a grassroots effort over multiple years.
Wow.
The good news is we're sitting within the Chief Strategy Office now and have the opportunity to get that enterprise momentum and mandate to make this a ubiquitous change. But we've really just been grassroots building the practice over several years. So this year, what we're really focusing on is leaning into the concept of shared OKRs. Because in the typical goal-setting behavior, each leader sets the direction for their organization, and then they go to their peers to get buy-in. And by design, their peers have done the same exercise, right? Everyone's planned to capacity. They need each other, but we've not really done the right exercises. So now we're trying to create that alignment by design, by looking at dependency maps before we create OKRs and inviting our leaders to co-create OKRs so that we're really solving problems better through the lens of the customer, right? Because our customers don't care how we're organized internally. That doesn't matter to them at all. So by bringing that focus into the lens of the customer and what problem we're solving for them or for the business, we're creating that shared environment where that alignment is up front.
when you're asking different divisions or groups to align and to have conversations with each other, there can be a bit of a turf war, to use a sort of colloquial term, in the sense that people will defend their interests and push back on other people's aims. Does OKRs help with that, or do you just need to have a well-established community and communication in place to get everybody on board with the idea that everyone has to compromise a bit when you're doing this?
We're definitely leaning into a community in order to foster that. So in our organization, we have a concept of an OKR champion that aligns to a particular level of leader.
Right.
So I have a group of over 100 OKR champions so far, whose role it is to try to help foster these conversations, understand where interlocks are appropriate, identify friction points. And I'll go so far as to say the early days of OKR adoption for any organization is a bit of business therapy. I'm going to borrow this from a friend of mine, Jamie Temple from VMware, who got on a call with the Adobe team. And she said, when you implement OKRs, it's a bit like picking up a big rock out of your garden and seeing all the squiggly bugs that live underneath it, right? You're going to find what's maybe a little bit icky. And that becomes the first step. And you just have to tell your leaders, hey, those bugs were there the whole time.
Right.
We're just picking up the rock and looking at them and having an honest conversation.
Again, that tone of conversation, which is a theme that's come through what Max and Tatyana are saying, and through to what you're saying as well, Renae. We talk about OKRs. It's a tool, it's a framework, but ultimately it rests on the conversations that it produces, I think. I love the idea that people will always blame the tool, won't they? Oh, you did this thing and therefore something was wrong. No, actually, the thing that was wrong all the time, we just exposed it, and now you can understand it. I'm really fascinated with the bottom-up approach at Adobe. If you're doing that from the bottom up, are all your leaders super excited to find all these things being exposed? How do you make sure they feel okay about it and they don't feel threatened by the idea that this initiative is perhaps bringing to light some practices that were suboptimal? What do you do about that? How do you make them feel good?
Well, some leaders have backed away, quite frankly. We don't have the mandate. It gets uncomfortable and they can be like, my team doesn't really have the bandwidth to take this on right now. So I do see that behavior. And when I see that, I just thank them and politely say, okay, I'll be back. I'll be back. So I think to a certain extent, our goal is to create momentum with those who are curious and passionate and believe in the work that we're doing, so that we can take that evidence to our executive team and say, this is working, and here are the results that we see. That's kind of common at Adobe, that we want to see proof before we decide that we're all in. So we've created that over the last couple of years to show, here are the problems that we're solving, here are the disconnects, and here's how we want to make strategy execution a differentiator for Adobe.
I just wish that everybody I talk to in the learning space could listen to you describing an absolutely clear example of how to get this done right, which is, don't try to convince the die-hard negative people, work with the positive people, grow the evidence, and do your work well, and eventually people come on board. And it all comes down, doesn't it, in the end, to evidence. You're saying that's what will persuade people.
Yes, they have to see that it is effective, that it reduces that friction, that it creates better focus, that it accelerates outcomes. People want to see that evidence, and that's why this kind of experimental grassroots nature has been effective, because I can go into an organization and say, we may not onboard this entire marketing team, but adoption marketing is really curious about what we're doing. Why don't we pilot this approach with this team so that you can share this evidence with your leaders? So that's really the approach that we're taking.
And thank you so much for that. This is a real treat to get all this insight from people who are doing great stuff in different organizations. I'm going to quickly jump back to Tatyana, then come back to you, and then probably wrap up with Max. I just want to get a few other things clarified in my mind, but thank you so much for that. Tatyana, if I could just jump back to what you've been doing at BetterUp, and there she is, talking from this point that Renae just mentioned about this idea of data-driven decision-making and implementing and integrating an agile product development approach. What do you think about the role the workflow plays in both the product success and the team growth? What contributed to your team growth in amongst the workflows and the team flows about that?
Yeah, so as you can probably guess, one of my biggest takeaways from OKRs is how much clarity they can bring.
Clarity has been a word that's come through what everyone's saying, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's one specific thing we've done at BetterUp that I haven't seen anywhere else. And some people might think it's a crazy investment, but hear me out. So OKRs is a quarterly process. Every quarter, we're going to adjust and update and create new ones. And every quarter, we spend about a week with the team going down and up and down the OKR chain, making sure everybody understands. And it's a lot of time and it's a big investment. But guess what it gives us? Clarity. And a lot of times people they will look at the OKRs and be like, okay, it looks good. And then you go to dig in a level deeper and you're like, do you understand how this bubbles up to this or this connects to that? And they look at you with a blank stare and maybe they understand or they understand it differently. BetterUp is a remote first company, so everybody's all over the place. You don't really get to see the face-to-face time. I think that's the reality for a lot of us nowadays. We're all distributed. So communication just kind of gets lost in the gaps. And by investing that much time and having the conversation for a week, but also showing that this is so important to the company that we're willing to spend this much time together to really understand it really drives the point home, the alignment and the strategy of the company, but also how important it is for the leadership to understand that everybody is on the same page and everybody has the same information.
Just off the top of my head, a quarter is 13 weeks. 1 week out of 13 is something like 8% of your working time. That's a huge investment, 8%. How did you persuade anybody to say, yes, okay, we're going to sign off on that?
One great way to do that is showing past success.
Right.
So you can start experimenting in a small pot, maybe have a small team that's working on a small project, have them do it, see if their productivity increased. In our case, we were able to increase productivity even by taking away 8% of the time through mutual understanding and clarity. And then it's much easier conversation when you go to the leadership, like, actually, I need this week to invest with my team in understanding and building up context so we can go faster for the rest of the week, of the rest of the quarter. Because you can also see an example where you just power along, you don't really stop and think about what you're doing, and you spend an entire quarter and then you look back and like, oh, I'm actually not sure what we did, but we were busy.
Yeah. Oh, that's my life. I need you to
we were working overtime.
You need to spend a week with me talking about my OKRs and sort me out. I love it. And actually, I see so many organizations where management is precisely doing what you've described, but they're not, the description is always look at a rowing boat with 8 people in it and they're all pulling exactly the same in the same direction. And that's how you get the efficiency.
It's absolutely a pricey investment, but it is worth it long term.
Thank you for that. That was super interesting. I'm going to jump back to Renae now, then I'm going to wrap up with Max very quickly, and then we'll get on to the second panel. Renae, going to pull you back in very quickly, just ask you about what happens beyond measuring success, because we've talked about success and so on, but this also links, doesn't it, to mental health and personal growth and going beyond just the success of meeting the business metrics. And it's been a major issue, I know from my own research, for a lot of companies in 2022 and 2023 is the well-being of people. Can you provide any insights into getting the right balance between fostering that team culture that enables personal growth while also getting the business results in place?
I think when you get really clear through your OKRs about what your direction is and how you will prioritize your time, ultimately, there's an opportunity there to reserve some of that bandwidth for your own personal growth.
Right.
And the other thing that I like about OKRs is that it's really about enforcing accountability and personal ownership of those business outcomes. And that in itself, I think, is an unlock for growth, personal and professional, just to understand your role and in what you're helping your teams to deliver. The other thing that I think is that I shy away from talking about productivity because to me, that's about doing things. We talk about at Adobe being more effective with our time. And that effective use of time, I think, really is an unlock for folks to focus on their own personal growth additionally.
I'm just thinking about that. I think it's absolutely fascinating, that idea of shifting from a focus on productivity to being, did you say effective?
Effective, yeah.
Effective rather than efficient. Yes. Yeah. So you're doing the right thing rather than doing something really well, even if it's the wrong thing.
Or really quickly. That doesn't matter. It's like, am I doing the right things to drive the outcomes that we've talked about for the business?
And if you then bring it back to the well-being point, if you are doing that, as you say, you've got more time for yourself and you have more time for, you're removing a great deal of the cause of stress in the workplace, which is uncertainty. Am I doing enough? Then there seems to be too much work. And if OKRs can provide a way of getting around that, fabulous. Brilliant. Right, I'm going to bring Max back to wrap up that final point that I left him with earlier on. And it chimes with this issue of well-being. Bad bosses, let's call them bad bosses who don't give that empathy, who don't provide the opportunity for psychological safety that you talked about right at the beginning, they can often produce that a difficult environment to work in, can't they? And we've heard Renae just there talking about how it is possible to get away from that by using OKRs. Can you just very quickly, 1 minute, share your reflections on how does this work? How have you seen this work at Google and elsewhere in terms of providing a better workplace for people through perhaps providing more empathy or other things?
This is exactly the question that I've been dying to answer, just listening to the whole discussion. I think it starts with the one-to-one. So you mentioned boss. I'll change, well, we can use some synonyms for that. You've got managers, you've got your functional leads. And it depends on how the organization is structured. But ultimately, in an ideal world, you will always have one person who is perhaps your senior, who is partly accountable for your success. And success does not just mean output, productivity, effective deliverables, but it also means, can you sustainably manage this? Are you enjoying yourself? Are you growing? Are you being a good team member as well?
Right.
And so I think the opportunity here is for that one-to-one to really be harnessed as a safe space where personal goals and stretch goals are identified and seeded. And then ideally, those are then aligned with the objectives, with the OKRs at a team level and ultimately an org level. And if you can get that kind of avatar, integration from the top down and the bottom up, then essentially what you're doing is you're aligning personal goals and personal well-being with the organizational objectives that you have at a business level. And so that's an ideal world, but it seems to be quite achievable. And at Google, the system that they use actually exemplifies this approach. So you have an OKR set at a VP level, and then you have your individual expectations, which you set with your manager, and then those things align with the team expectations. And through the tool and the system, the goal is that the work you do chips away at achieving that overall objective.
It also provides clarity about what the company's about. And this is where we're going. This is how we're going to do it. This is what's important. And it's not explicit, but it's clear. And by the way, if you don't like it, you can always go somewhere else. I'm not saying that's what the message is, but I've worked in too many organizations where people stick around. They're not aligned to what the company's doing, but they're not clear in themselves. They're not aligned. And make it clear for people. Give people the choice. Clarity. Treat people like grown-ups. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Max, and also Tatyana and Renae as well. Okay, let's move on to our second panel, which is getting a bit more tactical, how to run a successful OKR workshop. We've got probably 15 minutes. We're going to focus on some of the skills that Elvira mentioned right at the beginning that she had. Elvira, great to have you with us. You've got a lot of experience in organizational design, both as an internal leader and as an external consultant coming in. Tell us very quickly, how do I say very quickly, I'm going to shut up. You can take as much time as you want. How do you get OKRs to transform teams and companies? This is the crucial bit. How do we make it work?
Okay, I mean, I think the most important thing not to forget is that, just like we heard in the previous examples, that in not every cases do you have this whole OKR system happening top down. And I just want to make sure that the people who are listening in and now giving up that, oh, our company is far, far away from the point that we would have the whole OKR system top down, coming down. The good news is that you can still do it and you can still use it, and it's still a great tool. What you have to remember is that setting objectives and key results is basically an organization design on a team level, and not necessarily on a functional team level, but just like we heard, teams around the product, teams around the process, teams around the transformation program even. And the most important thing is that it helps us create conversations around very important things we discuss and make agreements about what is the work that we have to do now, not in general, but right now in a given period of time, and agreements around how we are going to make that happen. So to run these workshops, I think the really important part is not to get lost in the system, but to connect it always. If you have top-down goal system, fantastic. If not, at least define the purpose of your team, the team you are working in, and have very clear agreements about the definition of done. Yeah, so what is it that you have to achieve together as a team? And then you can slice it into shorter periods of time. What I often see is that people wait for the objectives to arrive to them with the teams. And a little tip for that is you don't have to wait for it, but you have to go around and negotiate with your customers and stakeholders to define the objectives. And maybe about the key results, also a little bit of a practical thing. It's not something what someone, for example, as a leader or a product owner should set. It's a negotiation between the team members. What is it that will be enough to achieve in order to achieve our goals? So basically, it's the time, what we also heard, like from Tatyana, that you have to invest time into this, and this time will definitely make its return. And another point maybe that's super important, that when we are using objectives and key results, they are just a tool that helps us to have these conversations, and not just about productivity or performance like we heard, but also, like the previous speaker said, about shining light to individual growth and evolution. Yeah, so I could talk a lot more about that, how to do that, but maybe then I won't shoot down every idea, and I would say that we have built into this flow that we are about to launch today, how to create these conversations, whom to involve into which conversation, how to negotiate and prepare the objectives upfront, and how to negotiate with the team to make the agreements. Because however good the goals, the objectives, and key results are, if not every member of your team understands them, feels completely committed to them, and feels that you have enough time and energy to kind of make them happen, then it's not going to work.
I have never thought before about OKRs, or indeed any objectives, being a negotiation. I've always thought of them as being cascaded down, but of course what you say makes perfect sense, and it's why I've probably been such a bad manager in my life, and I should have listened to you. I love the idea of having a negotiation, but at some point the negotiation has to stop, or at least has to pretty much stop, and you have to agree on a point. At some point, in your experience, is it okay for somebody to say, well, we disagree on this, but actually, I'm going to tell you, this is how it's going to be. This is what we're going to do. What do you do in that stage?
Yes, and as I said, there are different people whom you involve into the different negotiations. So
Right.
The objective setting is always either with your client customer, could be internal or external, or with your stakeholders. And just to say an example, your stakeholders might want you to achieve something huge within 3 months, and you know the capacity of your team, for example. So if you are there negotiating this, it's your responsibility, not just cascade down and say yes, but immediately raise concerns about this, that, hey, it's a wonderful wish, but we're not having enough people, not having enough resources to complete this. And the same on the team level with the key results. So to achieve each objective, what are the kind of key results we have to achieve that will be good enough and ensuring us that we can achieve the objective where they belong to. And I see quite often that they're also either product owners or just leaders wishing for 100% of something. And people in your team will negotiate that, hey, you know, it's never possible, for example, to have all of your leaders complete your leadership training. Yeah, it's a nice wish, but it never really happens. So is 80% good enough? And if we agree that that's enough, then we can make it happen. And the super cool thing about this, the negotiation also, is who is doing what. Because the objective and key result system can help us moving away from our job descriptions and task thinking, and helping us moving more towards the achievable and deliverables, and who's going to do what at any given time to achieve these objectives and key results, allow actually teams to self-organize, which means people can sign up to things either because they are the best at it, so they can contribute the most, or because they can learn the most there. And this is how you can facilitate individual growth also on the team level. So you create space for it within the team, and team members can support each other on that.
You're describing a very different sort of team to the way most teams are organized, in my experience, which is it's self-organizing. People are volunteering to come forward to do things. They are focused on achieving the goal, and my experience is that makes them much more productive, actually, when you work in that way.
That's where the secret lies. So it's not in the OKRs, but actually how you use them to let people self-organize and have more authority in kind of defining, agreeing together as a team who is doing what at any given time.
Very quickly, I'm going to ask Priz to get ready for her piece in a second. I just want to ask the question which we had earlier, because I thought it was a very interesting one, from Zishan, saying, are OKRs focused more on company goals or on employees? I think it's a really interesting question to ask at this point. What's your take on that? And then let's have Priz come forward with her demo and talking about how we can actually make this real. And then we're going to go over to Esther, I think. I'm just trying to, at the same time, look at the clock, organize things, but I want to get this question answered, which I think is really important. Is it about company? Is it about the individual? I'm going to guess what your answer is, but go ahead.
And I already wrote it in the chat because it's neither. So it's a team level alignment tool. You can use it on a company level, like we heard from the previous cases, from the previous speakers. But in some cases, depending how much control the company likes to take over what's happening in it, sometimes it's enough just to build the hierarchy of purposes. You don't need to build the hierarchy of objectives and key results. It's possible, but what it means is you don't need it on a team level to function well with it. So any team anywhere can start using the objective and key result system. And it's definitely not an individual thing. When I teach it, I tell my students to, okay, just for the sake of experimenting, you can set a time box for yourself, how far you look forward, and nothing will change extremely. What is it that you want to achieve by the end of it? And what would be the good signs that you are on a way to achieve that? But that's just for the practice thing. The objective and key result system is really for the team to make the agreements about what is the work we're going to do now and how we are going to do that. And in times of super adaptivity that is needed from companies, this is really the tool what you can kind of rely on, because instead of continuously restructuring organizations and redesigning organizations, you can use this system instead of the formal structure of the organization in the value creating reality, which allows adaptivity. So that means you can set goals on a different level and set the objectives and key results in the different realities also.
Elvira, I'm loving what you're saying, and I'm loving the picture of work you're describing. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go over to Pris now. Hopefully we're in a position whereby we can have her sharing the Superflow tool.
Yes, super. Thank you, Don. We are actually super excited to offer you our end of year gift from all of us at Superflow and from our creator, Elvira, the high performing teams flow. This is actually a premium content that is only available for the best fit teams, and only till the end of January. If you fill in a very short survey with your name and your motivations, we will send you the link to the high performing teams flow on a rolling basis. If you create a personal workspace or a company workspace in Superflow, you will actually find additional flows as well that will help you with your business development goals, personal growth journeys, or setting up the OKR system in the high-performing teams flow. Superflow is basically unique because of how it combines the learning and application piece of very complex methods and frameworks to help you get to results as quickly and efficiently as possible. So this is how we save 10x time, because you don't have to go through all the courses to learn the methodologies. They are actually baked into the process, learning by doing. This is how you can get very confident in facilitating an OKR workshop, from aligning your team on the long-term vision and on the company purpose, to define the team purpose, to plan your sprint, define the OKRs, and finally learn step by step from what you have achieved together and what are your agreements to make. Superflow has interactive canvases where you can set your personal goals and also go through step by step the journey, activity by activity, on how to fill in each of the canvases and what are the pro tips of our experts. So in the high performing teams flow, Elvira walks you through each of the canvas sections where you need to put your notes on the company purpose and see how it will align your team on the team function, team impact, goals and values to finally arrive to the team purpose. At every step, you can listen to bite-sized videos from the expert. I know you will not hear it, but hopefully you can at least see that her mouse is moving and I can move her around on the canvas. If I want, I can also hide the progress bar or hide the entire video too, or even make it full screen and just listen to Elvira speaking and the best advices she has for this particular session to make the most out of it. At the end of every session, we can arrive to the outcomes, and completing the session, starting the next one, we can see what were the previous outcomes so that we can build on them. And this is how Superflow helps you to really identify the most important data that you need every step of the way. For defining objectives and key results, you can also go step by step to what it takes to finally find the right time frame for the sprint, set the sprint duration, define the objectives, find the right key results, and get tips on how to do it well and how to make sure that your team is aligned on what to take. Obviously, at every step of the way, you can edit the canvas and create new notes. Finally, this is what will help you to get to the roadmap planning session where everyone can sign up as a self-organizing team, how Elvira just said, to get the right results into practice. And when you are done with the sprint, seeing what your team has achieved together, you can give each other feedback that leads you to what are the most important learnings that you can align your team on? What are your agreements to make that will help you to be even more effective and efficient next time? So as you could see, Superflow is much more than a bunch of templates. It reduces the time for learning and makes it the most efficient way with learning experience design, learning by doing, and retrieving just the best practices that you need at that particular moment. And it also removes the administrative burden. So hope you will give it a try and enjoy the high-performing teams flow.
Chris, thanks so much for that. Listen, I know that on my clock, which is on London time, and I always have my clock next to me, it says 1700 hours. So that's our wrap-up time. I want to beg everybody, can I have 2 more minutes, please? I want to just say what I loved about that, and then wrap up with Elvira. Look, I am not getting paid for doing this, and I have no financial interest in Superflow, but I just want to say I love what I'm seeing here. It reflects absolutely what the speakers are saying, which is this need to have a conversation which is not a one-off conversation, but a series of conversations, and it's a learning experience. So this tool for me, and it's not something I've seen anywhere else, and for me, it answers a lot of questions about management and helping people be good managers. It's simple, it is effective. It's more than just a bunch of templates, like Pris said. It removes a lot of the administrative burden from managers and indeed from teams of having to make this happen, and you build in the learning so that you're not just given something and you have to make it up. The learning is there to support you on the way, and best of all, it is built up so that it's not a one-off occurrence, but a series of objectives, a series of templates filled in that enable you to track how far have you got, how well do you succeed, and let's do a retrospective. Did we do well at it? What can we do better next time? At each step. For me, that's how you make organizations run well. And as we heard from the first panel, you can do an awful lot with that in some great organizations.
Thank you very much, Don. And if I can have 30 more seconds, I can also show where we are going with this.
Hey, yes, come on, let's have it.
Really exciting. So besides what we already have, our goal with Superflow is to build the creator platform for modern workflows, where even really complex sessions can be built from scratch, where you can track progress and have assignees, and for each of the objectives and key results. This way you can really understand data. And when you understand the data behind your notes and your every single piece on the canvas, even emojis, then with these ongoing insights, you can understand the whys of your team performance, how emotional reactions can drive your effectiveness. And with the work patterns, you can learn and identify areas for growth. So we are super happy if you can give it a try and partner with us on the long term.
Pris, I literally have little hairs on the back of my neck standing up because I find that so exciting. We've covered a lot today. I'm going to wrap up now very quickly. I want to say a big thank you to our panelists earlier, Max, Tatyana, Renae as well, also Pris, who's just been speaking. But I think we should give the last word to Elvira, who clearly has an awful lot of expertise in this, and it would be a mistake not to give her the final word on this. We've seen a lot of things coming through this: clarity, conversation, the idea that it's a tool that assists rather than something in its own right. Is there anything that you'd like to wrap up with, Elvira, just to help people walk away with a sense of what could people be doing in using OKRs to boost the productivity, but also, as we heard earlier, to be more effective, not just more efficient?
I think the most important thing from this is the built-in continuous learning on a team
Right.
level, on an individual level. And the shorter sprints you are, the more regularly you have the opportunity to fine-tune on what you are working on and how you are working together as a team. And this sort of evolution as a team is the necessity, because that's what actually going to make your team a high-performing one, and the evolution of the individuals in that. And what you have seen also is that there is space for this, and we believe in learning is not linear, but spiral. So the whole idea is that the format that's available right now of this flow is more for people who would facilitate workshops like this, but soon we're going to come out with a collaborative version as well. But just as a facilitator, also, I would say that don't think that this is something you would only listen to once and then you would do it. It's more like listen to the instructions. We really packed in kind of every word is chosen, every sentence is chosen, the minimum but most important guidelines. But you will see that then start doing it and start practicing it. And as you facilitate these sessions, you will come up with new questions. And then go back to it, because the answers are in the videos, in the instructions, but nobody's expected to pick it up, right, everything from the beginning. So listen to it, try it, experiment with it, go back, you will learn new things again. And it's the same how teams learn and work. We do something and then we stop and we have questions and we answer them. So it helps you the continuous learning process. And that's what evolution is.
Thank you for building that very important learning piece back into the conversation, Elvira. I'm just going to ask everybody, that's been super interesting. We've run over, that's in my fault. I'm the facilitator. I got too excited by what everybody was saying. A quick request from everybody who's in the room. There may be more of these next year from Superflow. Can you give us an emoji reaction? There's a reaction button at the bottom. Where is it? Do we have emojis? I'm so old. Yeah, there you go. So there you are. If you love it, stick a heart on. Let us know what you feel. Look at that, emojis going off all over the place. Let us know how you feel, and perhaps Superflow will come back next year trying to emulate the amount of value we've had from our panelists and participants so far this year. Thanks to everybody in the room for all of your thoughts and contributions. Thanks to all of our speakers today for everything they've brought to the session. I hope to see you in another Superflow webinar next year.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. See you soon.